shortcut through that building.
Okay, I don't see a way into this building, so I'm gonna look around. What is this place anyway?
It's a distillery. They made vodka and things like that.
Is vodka good?
Oh, God, no.
Russell doesn't like vodka. Got it.
Well, I never said that.
But it's not good?
It's poison.
But
I love it. Everyone loves it.
okay, that's all very confusing. Let me figure out how to get in, and then I'll find you some.
Wonderful if you could, actually, yes.
For our teleport and continuous locomotion modes, we provide corresponding ladder climbing methods. By default, player using teleport locomotion can target a ladder and after a short timer, get teleported to the top or the bottom, depending on where they started. The timer was necessary to ensure that players were intentionally using the ladder. We didn't want them to unintentionally target the ladder and become disoriented when they found themselves at the other end. Players using continuous locomotion can directly grab ladders to climb up or down. In this mode, they can grab a ladder rung and move their hand down to raise their body, or move their hand up to lower it. This allows players to move up or down the ladder rung by rung in a natural way. This mode turned out to be so popular that we added it as an option even for players using teleport locomotion. As it happens, most of the ladders in our game do not extend very far beyond the upper landing area. This made dismounting the top of a ladder challenging for players using continuous ladder climbing, since there's very little ladder to grab onto above the landing area. To solve this, we detect when the player stops holding the ladder with both hands and automatically teleport them to either the top or the bottom, based on the direction they were climbing. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of explicit ladder training in the game, so some players are surprised by this teleport behavior if they accidentally let go with both hands while climbing. Nevertheless, this was a better alternative to leaving the players hanging or forcing them to fall down if they let go with both hands, especially since some of our ladders are rather long and it would be tedious to have to reclimb just because a player happened to let go shortly before reaching the top.
Look who's back! I got the drone up and running again. Ignore that. We'll meet you outside.
Last 4.
It looks as if there are combined barricades up ahead. They're stopping anyone from getting any closer to the vault.
Okay. So, what do you think?
Make your way into the distillery and see where it takes you. With my drone back online, we've finally got the... Oh, no! You're kidding me!
Left. He left. 3 left.
put that to good use.
Out of cells. There's definitely a bunch of old bottles in here. Does alcohol go bad?
It only improves. It's all good, Alyx.
Russell, you're breaking up.
The vodka's good, Alyx! The vodka is good!
Some of our earliest experiments on the project involved placing old Half-Life 2 models in a level and walking around them in VR. These included static models of enemies, like Combine soldiers or zombies. We found that players really enjoyed being able to inspect these models because VR let them get much closer than they'd been able to in the past. Players reported getting a sense of the true size of the characters and would often point out details that they had never noticed before, even though they had seen these models many times throughout Half-Life 2. These reactions led us to the idea of creating an enemy that took advantage of that experience, one that required players to spend long periods of time in close physical proximity to it. But enemies typically don't let the player get near them without attacking, so we felt it made fictional sense for this enemy to be blind, and to feature non-combat gameplay as its focus. Early experiments with guiding a blind creature using sounds were immediately interesting, and gave us a way to create scenarios unique to the product. Thus, the concept for Jeff, known as the blind zombie internally, was born.
The Zen flora you see on the wall here, which we refer to as Zen ears for obvious reasons, animate in reaction to the same sounds as Jeff. Early in development, we would observe situations where playtesters would fail to notice Jeff becoming enraged by a sound. If the player died as a result, they felt frustrated and wronged. We worked to make Jeff's animations and sounds communicate his level of aggression to the player as clearly as possible. But if players weren't looking at Jeff, they could still be caught unaware. Adding these Zen ear growths to the environment was a way for us to help players be more aware of Jeff's reactions to sound. The Zen ears work as an extra layer of visual feedback for Jeff's behavioral state, one that lives in the environment instead of on Jeff himself.
Alyx, come in, Alyx. Alyx? Oh, there you are, there you are.
There's no straight shot to the vault. I'm gonna head inside and find a way out.
You keep your tongue to yourself and I don't shoot you in it. Better ways to die than this.
Alyx, you're never gonna believe...
Russ?
Right from the beginning of development, we intended to feature a variety of visually distinct Zen flora and fauna in Half-Life Alyx. But we didn't yet know how these visual elements would be used to craft interesting gameplay. Referred to internally as Zen clams, the Zen plants you would see here were originally built to add visual flavor to the world and were only lightly interactive. They would track the player's head and hands and would close tight if the player got too close. When we began working on Jeff, we wanted to find surprising new ways to use sound as a core gameplay mechanic. In particular, we wanted to make players wary of the environment around them. We realized we could use the Zen clams as a type of noise hazard by having them repeatedly snap open and shut when approached by the player. We had already placed these clams in earlier parts of the game, which meant that players would reach the distillery with an understanding of how they functioned. The introduction of Jeff changed the player's relationship with the Zen clams, as they went from being harmless but annoying to a dangerous hazard that players would need to take care to avoid.
Hey, you with the blood on you. You with the blood. I got a little situation here.
Yeah, you sure do.
You don't happen to have a gun on you, do you? Thanks.
What the hell was that?
Oh, that's Jeff.
Jeff?
Oh, don't worry. He can't see. Hears just fine, though. Got an ear like Mozart.
Who?
All right, now let me help you out. All right, see you on the other side, Greenhorn. And keep your voice down.
Early versions of the distillery explored a variety of methods for subtlety, teaching players how Jeff works without any explicit exposition. Though some of the training techniques were quite successful, anything less than a complete understanding of Jeff's behavior resulted in players bungling their way through this section of the game and having a terrible time doing it. Eventually, we determined that explicit training was necessary, and that's where the character of Larry came in. Larry acts as a gate, delivering critical information about Jeff's behavior before allowing the player to proceed. It's a dense learning environment and a delicate balancing act, ensuring that we deliver the rules of Jeff while still making Larry an interesting character. To spread out the exposition, you'll notice that it's distributed over a few different story beats as Larry first introduces Jeff, then demonstrates Jeff's predictable reaction to a breaking bottle, and finally explains that the player can prevent their own coughing on Zen spores by covering their mouth.
There he is. See? He's totally predictable. But he will rip your arms off if he finds you. Hey, those things are nasty. You gotta cover your mouth.
Got it. Thanks.
Hey, I almost forgot. What's your name?
Alyx. Alyx Vance.
Hey, Alyx, I'm Larry. Nice to meet you. Try not to get killed.
A core element of both the environment and Jeff himself are the Zen plants seen here spewing toxic gas that makes the player cough. These were not created to be merely ornamental or to support the novel VR interaction of players covering their mouth. They were added specifically to solve a long-standing challenge that we had with illustrating Jeff's personal space. One of the trickier aspects of designing Jeff was striking the right balance between perceived threat and actual threat. Many scenarios in the level forced the player into close proximity with Jeff in order to create tension. We found that these moments could be exciting, but they could also become frustrating when players accidentally got too close to Jeff and were killed unexpectedly. Players reported not understanding how close is too close. We tried a number of solutions, such as adding glowing tentacles to Jeff that acted as a visual representation of the perimeter of his personal space. Touch the tentacles, and you die. Getting the look and feel of these tentacles to a satisfactory place proved challenging, however, and we backed away from the idea. Another problem we encountered was that a subset of our players quickly became comfortable around Jeff once they became adept at keeping their distance from him and avoiding sources of noise. For these players, dealing with Jeff felt trivial. He simply didn't feel like a threat to them. We discussed a variety of potential solutions to these problems, even wacky concepts, such as giving Jeff the ability to teleport to sources of noise. But it was difficult to come up with ideas that didn't feel like we were giving Jeff the ability to cheat. Eventually, we came up with the idea of having the player cough. This was appealing, as it gave us a way to make the player themselves a source of noise, thus causing Jeff to pursue them. We were also interested in making the environment more dangerous generally, and so our first experiments with coughing involved littering the level with Zen plants spewing toxic gas. Initial tests showed a lot of promise. Players now felt like Jeff was a dangerous pursuer, and they must carefully observe the environment to avoid the gas. We observed that players had a natural instinct to cover their mouth with their hand to suppress their cough. This was an affordance that VR with tracked hand controllers supported very naturally, so we implemented this mechanic right away. This still left us with the problem of players being unsure of how close they could safely get to Jeff. We realized that the earlier experiment of adding tentacles to Jeff could be replaced with a much simpler approach of attaching a toxic cloud directly to him. There were multiple benefits to this. First, it gave players visual feedback for how far they needed to stay away from Jeff to be safe. Second, it made those times when Jeff did get close all the more tense, with players now needing to commit a hand to covering their mouth. Finally, we didn't need to teach the players anything new. They could carry forward what they had already learned about toxic gas in the environment and apply those lessons to Jeff himself.
One of our major goals in the design of Half-Life Alyx was to reach the widest possible audience. This meant developing for all of the major VR hardware in the market, as well as accommodating different sized play spaces, traversal preferences, and so on. The accessibility option that had the most knock-on effects into the design of the game, from controller bindings, to game logic, to level design, was the support of a single controller mode, for players who don't use two controllers. In this mode, reloading is performed by moving the weapon to the shoulder and pressing a button, much like arcade games which require the player to fire their weapon off-screen to reload. The flashlight was modified to attach to the primary hand, and gas masks were added so that players could muffle their coughs hands-free. Even the gun used in the final Strider battle, with its two-handed aiming and reloading controls, was modified to be operable with one hand.
Even though Larry instructs the player on the basics of how Jeff works, we found that we needed to let players test those rules without having Jeff in their immediate personal space. If we made players first interact with Jeff face to face, they often fell to pieces and forgot the rules. They would die over and over again, and their fear of Jeff would quickly turn into frustration and annoyance. This area was created to serve as a training playground, where players can observe Jeff reacting to various sounds while remaining safe from his attacks. It contains many of the elements that are encountered throughout the rest of the level, including some falling bottles, a padlock that needs to be shot, and various types of Zen plants. Jeff remains close enough to feel threatening, but he cannot attack the player. Players can spend as much time here as they need to, and move on when they feel like they've got a good grip on how Jeff works.
As we refined Jeff's behavior in visual design, we thought a lot about how we wanted players to feel about him. The goal was to have playtesters describe Jeff with words such as menacing, threatening, and deadly, and for that reason it became important that players not survive if they got too close to Jeff, so we decided that his attack should result in instant death. This would teach players unambiguously that Jeff was too dangerous to trifle with, but it left us with the challenge of teaching this to players without necessarily killing them. The approach we took was to give the player opportunities to witness Jeff attack and kill other characters. Early versions of the level included scenarios where Jeff and the player would encounter zombies and Combine soldiers. The player could attack these enemies, or use sound to lure Jeff into place so that he could pummel them with his massive arms. This gave players an opportunity to witness Jeff's power and his method of attack without dying at his hands themselves. Unfortunately, this outcome wasn't guaranteed, as some players would opt to kill those enemies themselves, and having these other characters present was also quite expensive in terms of animation, sound, and level content. We were already grappling with the challenge of keeping this level well-paced and within scope, and so we cut these sections. But this still left us with the original problem of how to demonstrate Jeff's ability to kill without killing the player. We chose to address this by adding beats to existing animated sequences. For example, when the player opens this two-handed roller door, we added a head crab for Jeff to munch on in full view of the player. We also added a similar beat to the later elevator ride, with Jeff smashing a head crab against a wall before melting it down with acid.
Jeff's character design went through several significant revisions over the course of development. Just by looking at him, we wanted players to understand certain things about the character. Our first priority was to communicate his blindness. Second, we wanted the character to feel physically imposing. After all, the entire concept of Jeff had grown out of our observation that just being close to a character in VR could make for a powerful experience. Finally, we wanted players to understand the blind zombie's behavioural state at a glance. Is he feeling angry? Did he just hear something and is feeling curious? And so on. The first design that we modelled and animated was a sort of combine worker robot. The robot's face featured a holographic display that could flip between different icons that represented its state. A large piece of rebar jutted out of the back of the robot's head, sparking electricity and spewing smoke. This was meant to demonstrate that its visual sensors were impaired, making it blind. We made the robot tall and hulking. It looked heavy, unpredictable and dangerous. However, player reactions to this robotic design showed that it had problems. Players would initially focus on the head's holographic display. Parsing the face and understanding the meaning of the icons proved too challenging for players, and even worse, this element distracted from the rebar poking through the robot's head and their understanding that it was blind. Players found the robot imposing, but we weren't getting the deeply visceral reaction of fear that was desired. A trip back to the drawing board landed us with the more organic character you see in front of you. Drawing inspiration from the idea of coal miners succumbing to the black lung, we focused on the concept of a member of the Combine's Zen cleanup crew that had succumbed to the Zen infection. This gave us the visceral reaction from players which we were looking for. A human face is still visible, but the eyes are clearly decayed, communicating blindness. The organic nature of this design allowed us to lean more heavily on audio to feed back the behavioural state, with animalistic grunts and roars that came to include more human-sounding elements over time.